Columbia SIPA, the School of International Politics and Political Affairs, where, you know, they have Hillary Clinton, Victoria Nuland, and Rebecca Weiner, who helped the NYPD direct their raid against the students in Hamilton Hall. Who's the dean of SIPA?
A former Israeli intelligence agent.
Yep. Yeah.
It's just too on the nose. By the way, I don't think we've talked about Rebecca Weiner on the Grayzone stream. I might be forgetting, but that was a really big article you guys did.
Yeah.
Where basically you have a Columbia professor working with the NYPD at the same time, so therefore snitching on her own students. It's a huge scandal, and that article was widely circulated. It made a lot of waves.
Yeah, we got like 7 million impressions on Twitter, so it definitely shocked people. Well, this is her getting congratulations from Columbia SIPA. This is her sort of congratulatory message on the social media of Columbia SIPA for Rebecca Weiner, who is Deputy Commissioner for Intelligence and Counterterrorism at the NYPD. So back in 2011, the Associated Press exposed that division within the NYPD for maintaining a demographics unit, which hired out mosque crawlers, as they called it. I mean, and demographics unit is such an obvious echo of Israeli security language. They hired mosque crawlers to surveil mosques and Palestinian bookstores across New York, but they also spied on students, Muslim students across the New York area, but also as far as Rutgers and Yale. Muslim students were involved in Palestine solidarity activity. Rebecca Weiner got involved with that unit as its Middle East liaison. So she was obviously liaising with their Tel Aviv office. They have an office in Tel Aviv, so they coordinate with Israeli intelligence. And she was credited by Mayor Eric Adams with helping to preside over Columbia's response to the occupation of Hamilton Hall by students who were staging a sit-in, during which an NYPD officer discharged his handgun. Students were beaten and dragged out. The NYPD went in with a Bearcat like it was Waco, which was itself a giant crime. So here's the person directing it all. It just really shows how compromised not only Columbia, but the NYPD is by Israeli interests or Zionist interests. And we learned about her just through the press conference she did with Eric Adams, where she was congratulated. And it was like giant alarm bell went off when I saw that.
I wonder if she's the one who obtained that super sleuth intelligence that the wife of Sami al-Arian, 63-year-old wife of Sami al-Arian, she's a retired teacher, was on campus for like 20 minutes. And that's what they used. That's what Mayor Adams and his media stenographers used as evidence that the Columbia protests were infiltrated by outside agitators. The fact that this retired teacher went to campus for like 20 minutes with her 2 daughters. And the al-Arian family has already been through a huge ordeal because Sami al-Arian was indicted in a bogus Patriot Act case on accused of financial support for Palestinian militant groups. It turned out he was just raising money for charity. Accordingly, the prosecution couldn't win a single guilty verdict from the jury. And when they failed, they basically threatened to bring the case again. And rather than put his family through the whole ordeal, Sami al-Arian took a plea deal. He accepted a limited sentence and deportation. And then, just to make sure he spent more time in prison, they forced him to testify in a totally unrelated grand jury case. So anyway, the fact that his wife shows up for 20 minutes on campus was used by Mayor Adams' office as evidence that the Columbia protests were infiltrated. And of course, the media, local media, and CNN went along with that. So I wonder if she had a hand in that as well, given her high perch as an intelligence official involved with the NYPD and Mayor Adams' office.
Well, given that she mentioned that during her press conference, I would say so. I would say almost certainly. And a smear like that has the malevolent aroma of the Mossad all over it. That's what I'd say. I mean, if you look at Sami al-Arian's trial or the Holy Land 5 trial, the Israeli intelligence was directing these trials. The research was all provided by Stephen Emerson, who is de facto an Israeli spook. And it was all furnished to Gordon Kromberg, the prosecutor, who is a hardcore pro-Israel zealot, who is the federal prosecutor who will preside over the prosecution of Julian Assange if he ever comes to the U.S.
Wow.
And I saw Kromberg in action. I mean, the guy is just a straight up Islamophobe fanatic. I think he was pals with Stephen Emerson. But during these trials, Israeli intelligence, for example, brought families of suicide bombing victims to outside the courtroom of Samuel Al-Arian's trial to try to influence the jury. And during the Holy Land 5 trial, a Mossad agent was actually brought in to testify, and they cleared the gallery, including the press gallery, so no one could actually report on the identity of that figure who was just there to like psyop the jury, basically. I mean, it was at every level, direct Israeli intelligence influencing what US courts were doing. And it all ended in a big, giant nothing, where Al-Arian was let go and, you know, lives in Turkey today. The Holy Land 5 should all be let go. What were they doing? They were just directing charity to organizations in Gaza that USAID and the Red Cross were also involved with. And it was all just a means of justifying the war on terror, of making the American public convinced that the terrorists lived among us and the Bush administration and John Ashcroft were cracking down. And now it feels like 9/11 again. Like there was this whole kind of almost like it felt like a political realignment where some figures on the right were coming around to opposing the war state or denouncing permanent war over Ukraine. And now it's just back to the post 9/11 era. And we can see those same that same spirit of neoconservatism deeply embedded in the Republican Party, particularly the congressional Republicans, but all the main kind of right-wing media organizations. We'll be talking more about that as we discuss Biden's threat of a pause on weapons to Israel over Rafah and the kind of freak out that that's caused. But it really does feel like with the students causing this, you know, national meltdown, it really feels like the post 9/11 era again.